Okay, so there's church. It's a very fundamentalist church, and they're not doing really, really well. And the pastor gets up on one Sunday, and he says, oh, man, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And he has this idea, and he says, okay, for next week, whoever is the first person to donate $1,000 will get to choose the 3 hymns. 3 hymns. And immediately a hand went up, and he said, Gertrude. She was one of the wisdom keepers, so her name was Gertrude and not, Fawn or Faith or Light or what's another current name? God, I must be old. Cloud. Her name was not Cloud. So she gave the $1,000. The following Sunday, he was there and he said, okay, so Gertrude, come on up. You gave us $1,000, so you get to choose the 3 hymns. And she said yes, and she was really excited. And he said, what hymns do you want? And she said, I want him, and I want him. Thank you. All right. I was at a conference this week and heard that, and I thought, well, that's going to come in handy. I didn't know it would be immediately. All right, so we're in October. We're in Halloween. Yay. Is that about the candy or the costumes or both? Both, yeah. Okay. So, no more scary stories. We are living in a time in which it's so energizing, it's so engaging, it's so seductive to get involved in the scary stories that we often don't realize that we are perpetuating that energy and telling ourselves the scary stories. And it's not necessarily a good idea. In fact, I'm going to say it's a really bad idea. It's not the best use of this creative power, this imagination, this amazing presence that we have called God. And if God, by the way, if you're new and this is, you're triggered by that word, that G-O-D word, I want to offer a couple of ideas for you. First of all, we are talking about presence, not personality. We're talking about this idea that surrounds and fills us. And beautifully, 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 Susan Edwards Martin described all that God is, the love, the joy, the peace, that overwhelming sense of well-being that is what we come from and what we are. So if you grew up with a God of old, which was the patriarchal, angry guy who was sitting up in the cloud keeping track and had fallen off his anger meds, that's not what we're talking about here. So I want to invite you into an idea of presence, glorious, organized design. Maybe it's light for you. Maybe the word is love. Maybe it's universal wisdom. Whatever that is, embrace that. Because when we know that we are part of it and that which is true about God, that love, that peace, that presence is true about us, then we recognize that we have those same gifts of creation, of creativity, of power. They are alive within us. And we are the way that God, that presence, that energy, that idea shows up in the world. So how are we going to use that inheritance? How are we going to use that identity? How are we going to be? Are we going to tell the scary stories? Because there are a lot of them out there, and there are a lot of them in here. Sometimes we don't even know that we have all of these scary stories going on about, oh, I'm getting old, so I'd better think about getting a new hip or a new shoulder or a new whatever it is, new partner, new house. I don't know what it is for you. Or, well, the economy sucks, so I better hold tight to my money. My relationship isn't doing very well, so I guess I better just hunker down and settle. Those are the scary stories we tell ourselves. Those are not the stories of delight, glory, and God. Those are the scary stories that are fed from our fears, our ego, and our limitation. They are fed and anchored in the idea that there isn't enough. Now, we live in an infinite, abundant, limitless universe with the wisdom, the intelligence that absolutely keeps the planets in their orbits, keeps the sun rising and setting, keeps the tides rising and falling. This is the intelligence that we're talking about, and it's really, really capable of managing and directing and guiding and informing all of us in our lives if we align with it, if we listen, if we are willing to step away from the scary stories. So what's the story you might have about your current reality? What is just the visceral story? And if I were to have a one-on-one conversation with you, how would you describe that story to me? Now, here's another question. Is that story the one you want to tell? Is that the reality you really want? Now, are you living the life you want? Are you able to tell me the story about the dreams that you have, that you hold in your heart? And is there a coherency? Is there an alignment between what you want and who you are as a divine being, as a divine creation of spirit? Is there an alignment and a coherency between the life you want to live and the life you want to celebrate and radiate and the life that you are experiencing right now? So I'm going to really trigger you if I do this right. Is there great coherency between who you are being in this moment and the divine blueprint that Spirit holds for you? Is that there? Joseph Campbell, this is a long quote. You are more than you think you are. There are dimensions of your being and a potential for realization and consciousness that are not included in your concept of yourself. You might have noticed. Your life is much deeper and broader than you conceive it to be here. What you are living is but a fractional inkling of what is really within you and what gives you life, breath, and depth. So what gives you life, breath? I figure that if I give you gentle images, then you can take in the big truths, right? It'll just kind of make a more receptive, vulnerable space for everybody. So what is giving you life, breath, and depth? What gives you that? What is it that you want? What do you think would give you life and breath and depth? Is it in your life now? Are you able to identify it and connect with it emotionally, energetically? Can you imagine that? Are you there? Because as he said, we are living but a fractional inkling of what we are and who we are and what we have the capacity to be. So we all have ways of describing our lives. We also have lots of ways, probably even more ways, of describing how our lives are not, right? The stories we tell and think about who we are, what's possible, and what we can do are actively creating both the blueprint and your journey right here and right now. So the idea I want to work with today is about the divine truth of who you are and how much you are inviting and allowing truth to be the story you tell. So let's go back to this for a second. When I see people and they come to me for spiritual counseling, often the default is what we don't want to be, what we don't want to feel, what we don't want to have. And it's very interesting because I will say, so how do you want to feel? And the first response most of the time is, well, I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel angry. I don't want to feel lack. I don't want to feel limited. I don't want to feel like I'm alone. I don't want to feel, there's all of this. So we are creating just as powerfully with those ideas as we are when we say, I want to feel joyful. I want to feel peaceful. I want to feel generous and open-hearted and willing. Now, this is not a suggestion that we go into the bypass land of unicorns and pink fairy dust and pretend that we're not feeling what we're feeling. Because until we feel it, till we identify it and feel it in that step of revealing what's going on inside here, then we can't heal it. So we absolutely have to recognize where we are and start where we are. We start where we are. And we need to have a destination. If I decide to get navigation on my phone, I have to have an idea in mind of where I want to go. Because I can't tell Siri, well, I don't want to go over here. I don't want to go there. And I really don't want to go there, even though sometimes she'll take me there. So I spent this last week at a spiritual conference in Lee's Summit, Missouri at Unity Village. And there were a whole bunch of wonderful practitioners and ministers and people and musicians who really, really are on a path or desiring to be on a path that is about unfoldment, that is about empowerment, that is about really knowing our oneness, our oneness with Spirit, and the kind of glory and divinity within us that goes so far beyond, oh, I'm going to demonstrate or manifest a new car. Because most of us think that that's alignment. Because we've been raised in such a materialistic environment. Our society says it's all about the stuff, it's all about the stuff, it's all about the stuff. Yes, we have to have stuff. We have to have stuff. I mean, thank God we have clothes, right? There are a lot of people I just don't want to see naked, and you don't want to see me naked, so clothes are really, really important. This is a weird talk. Okay. Exactly, the spirits. Okay. So, but we need to anchor first in that place of knowing the divine truth of who we are. There is nothing wrong with this stuff, but it is not the path. It is not the answer. It is the frosting on that cake. I come back to food a lot. It is the frosting on that cake of spiritual unfoldment and realization. And so knowing what we want comes from that divine place of who we are, knowing who we are. And that's where we come back to that sense of, well, I want to be peaceful. Because doesn't everybody want to be peaceful? We want to know that there is enough. We live in a world that is enough. But the stories, the scary stories, have mostly said there isn't enough. And we tend to participate in them because they're very engaging. So anyway, as I said, I was in Kansas City, and it was inspiring and powerful. And throughout the week, though, I somewhat was monitoring the government shutdown and how it was affecting air travel, because I knew that on Friday I was going to be flying back from the airport in Kansas City. I had to connect in Salt Lake, then I was going to be landing in Burbank. And of course, I read the report that said apparently on Monday, the air traffic control at Burbank had all gone home, and they were monitoring all the flights from San Diego. What? So I had concerns. My thoughts danced just a little about how TSA might be a challenge, crowded, because it's always fun, right? And by the way, challenge is the word we use in New Thought communities, positive thinking communities, when we don't want to say, horrific mess I didn't cause. It was also aware that air traffic controllers were working without pay, and that many of them had opted to not show up to work. So I described that as interesting. And here's another one for you. The word interesting is a euphemism for, God, I hope I live through this. So altogether, I realized I was telling myself some pretty scary stories. Now, I have seen enough airplane disaster movies and enough War of the Worlds kind of thing that if I want to create great imaginings of what could possibly go wrong in a government shutdown with air travel, oh, I can go there. I can absolutely go there. But that was not going to serve me. And when I caught myself in it, I went, okay, I have a choice here. I have a choice to use this awareness, these tools, this power, this presence, this knowing, and to not tell a scary story. I have the capacity to create a story that I want. And so I flipped all of it. Because what I'm really clear is that our stories drive and inform us. Our narratives, both in the moment and around the moment, create a blueprint for our lives. Our stories are creating our lives. Let me say that again. Our stories are creating our lives. And that's because we energize them. We pay attention to them. We technicolorize them. I just created a new word. And we really, really we go to town with our stories, and we can just come up with all of this stuff. And because we live in a universe that has only one word, yes, it goes, okay, that's what you want. And it's not because, again, not unicorns, fairy dust says, okay, magic, magic. It's that when we start to vibrate at that level of joy, of peace, then we are rising up to the level of spirit. And we begin to absolutely be in the vibration with others and with those ideas that are creative and that are life-affirming, life-informing. and energizing, and they are enthusiastic ideas. They are healing ideas. And when we are down here in those ideas of limitation, of fear, that's where we vibrate. If you've read David Hawkins, and we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, that level down here is where a lot of society is. It's called the 200 level, and they go up and up and up, and I'm not going to get into that. But here's the thing you need to know, and I'll repeat the quote that I told you 2 weeks ago from David Hawkins. If 15% of the population of any group chose to vibrate in that realm of love, and you don't even have to consciously say, I'm vibrating in love now, but that you went into the world dedicated to being loving, to being compassionate, peaceful, vulnerable, and blessing, kind, you raise the other 85%. You raise them up in that vibration. We have great power. We have great, great power. And so I did not want to be traveling in a world of 85%ers. I needed to be in that 15%. And so that story, as I said, I had to tell a new one. I got to say, TSA was a breeze. There was no one there. Skip was also traveling. We went through like, boom, didn't we? It was so easy. And my flights were on time. One of them was early. Everything, we landed safely at Burbank. Did you read in the news anything about a plane crashing in Burbank on Friday night? No. We got here safely. We have stuff that we go through in the physical world, but the experience we have is not the same as the stuff we go through. Our experience of a situation is what we think about it. Our experience is the story we tell. Our description of that experience is the story we tell. And it's the story we tell or hold or believe that contains all of the meaning, because we give our stories their meaning. We give them the meaning, not the world. But we hear something and we go running with it and we say, okay, I got this. I'm going to tell this story now. And if it is something you heard out in the world on the news or online or on Facebook, I'm going to say, before you start to run with it, please consider it a prayer request. Whatever that thing is, and then set it down. Set it down. We give our stories their meaning. See, again, you're receptive, you're open, you're peaceful. So here's the question again. What's the story you're telling yourself about who you are and who you're not? I could potentially have to deal with all of the stuff that I was reading and hearing about with the shutdown, but I didn't want that. You know, the whole thing about air traffic controllers and TSA being understaffed, not paid, and disrespected. Good times, right? No, not for me. So I realized I had gotten into participation with that idea. But it wasn't until I changed my thinking, looked at it and changed it, as I identified that I came back into the awareness of my unity with a higher and greater idea. So when we aren't mindful and paying attention, it is very seductive, and it's very easy to participate in the world's unexamined patterns, the world's unexamined blueprints. Now, I can only speak for myself. I want to create a pattern, a blueprint that is worthy of my life, worthy of following, worthy of seeing it unfold and come true. Anybody else? Okay, 3. Okay. Buckminster Fuller said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So I know, that's a big one, isn't it? Because we have an existing model in lots of different areas. Those models, they're absolutely obsolete. So we can fight them, we can paint those deck chairs on the Titanic, or we can build a new boat. We can build a new boat. And we start with, what are we navigating by? Are we navigating by heart, truth, wisdom, or fear? I had to build a new model for myself that made that old one obsolete. So I created a story of ease, of divine order, because that's the nature of God. So Barbara Marx Hubbard said, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos can shift the whole system to a higher order. So as an island of coherence, I also brought and extended to the people around me that same grace, ease, and joy. And I had a great time at that airport. We got there very early. I was able to sit and read and enjoy myself, have a nice leisurely meal. I'm sure Skip wrote 2 more books and did his doctoral thesis because we use our time differently. Wayne Dyer wrote that the state of your life is nothing more than a reflection of your state of mind. And he also wrote this: conflict cannot survive without your participation. Oh, man. Every time you and I choose to rise up in possibility, adaptability, and curiosity, we not only raise the vibration of our own lives, but we raise the vibration of the world in which we live. We can also lower that vibration, but it's important that we rise up. And Barbara Marx Hubbard wrote, we are moving from unconscious evolution through natural selection to conscious evolution by choice. Mother Earth is giving birth to a co-creative humanity. That's not a majority anywhere, but it's cropping up everywhere. Cropping up everywhere because old leadership, hear that, does not have the authority to guide us. Take a breath. Old leadership does not have the authority to guide us. And that old leadership within us as the microcosm includes the stories that you and I have been hosting and telling. So let's look at this power that we have here. Ernest Holmes said, we straighten out consciousness by clear thinking. We straighten it out by clear thinking. And when the inner consciousness agrees with the truth, the spiritual truth, that there is one life, one power, one presence, it is infinite, it is good, and we can use it, and it uses us. When we are clear on that, then shift begins to take place because it starts within us first. Again, we start here so that the experience out here and the story we can begin to tell about, and we may not even see evidence of it, but the story we begin to see and create within ourselves has this energetic vibration, this frequency that lifts us up to the level of the divine. It is the truth of who we are. It is the truth of who we are. Now, Ernest Holmes, who founded this teaching, also said that we hurt ourselves greatly because we believe in more than one power. We believe in a power for good and a power that is not good, a power for evil, instead of recognizing that it's one power, one presence, one infinite power, one infinite presence, and it is good, it is love. And that duality means a belief in more than one power back of all things. And he wrote, when one separates himself from the divine fire, he or she becomes an isolated spark. We are strong only when we are united with life, and that's capital L, life. As soon as our consciousness is detached from our spiritual wholeness, as soon as we are no longer courting, cultivating, nourishing, nurturing, and telling that story about our spiritual wholeness, we can no longer draw from that inexhaustible reservoir of eternal existence. So we become exhausted. There's nothing to fall back on. Right? Do you get that? So what are your stories? What are your scary stories? I know, cheap trick, right? We give our agency over and we don't even realize it. If you're deeply engaged with stories and narratives that aren't your own, or the old leadership, right? Old ideas in our head or something out there, it's very likely you have handed over the blueprint. You've given up the design to something and someone else. So I was in a workshop yesterday see, I'm passionate about this stuff. I get home from 8 days away, and what do? First thing, I dive into a Zoom workshop on solution, on restoration, on social justice, on healing and equity and love. And I loved it. So Deborah Johnson did this workshop, and I want to invite you into one of the ideas that she shared. Whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. Narrative brings the framing. Narrative brings the discussion. Narrative creates the solution. Narrative creates the actions. Whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. So if fear is controlling the narrative, it is controlling the outcome. If greed or separation or othering controls the narrative, that's the outcome. Whoever controls the framing controls the outcome. Whoever controls the discussion controls the outcome. Whoever controls the solutions controls the outcome. And whoever controls the actions controls the outcome. So, what is controlling your narrative? What is the narrative that you have allowed in? And are you willing to no longer be part of a scary collective that is about limiting your capacity for greatness, for magnificence, for our capacity, for lifting up, for greatness, for rising? You know, so here's the thing. I know, I got to bust myself first. I have been subscribing. Let me see, did I do this yet? There it is. Okay. I've been subscribing to an idea that sometimes I think about this. I'm only one person, and what can one person do? Anybody else? Yeah. And then I had to remember, well, Martin Luther King Jr., Jane Goodall, Anne Frank, Arlo Guthrie, Mahatma Gandhi, Amelia Earhart, Ryan White, Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama, and on and on and on. One person can do a hell of a lot. We start with ourselves. There might be a story. There isn't enough time to do all I want. The real story, the new story is I am the master of my time. I am guided to do that which inspires and lifts and heals me. My old story. The government and the leaders just don't get it. My new story will wait till they get a load of me. I thought that would land with a bigger laugh. Yeah, all right. I'm just going to move on. This weekend, many of you might be participating in a demonstration. On the 18th, there's a demonstration. It's called No Kings. What I want to invite you to do, Ernest Holmes guided us in saying, rather than being against, be for. Be for. The energy in being for something, being for life, for justice, for truth, for glory, for healing, for wholeness, for compassion. That energy carries with it so much more possibility and creative energy. It is the healing energy. That stuff down here of being against does not create anything but more stuff to be against. So as you move into those demonstrations, regardless of where you are in your spirituality or your politics, I really want to implore you to move into those with a sense of being a channel for the wholeness of life, for the reality of love. Instead of being a story about fighting and struggling and conquering, consider being a story of restoration, of hope, of healing, of love. There's a difference between hating the world we have and creating the world we want. There's a big difference. So create the world you want. No more scary stories. Be creators of the world you want. Be the world you want. Be the light bringers for that world. Be the story of the life that you truly are. Be the story of that light that shines within you, as you, and every being on this amazing and beautiful planet. Be that story. We don't need the old stories. We're done. Yesterday ended last night. We are here. We are now. And so it is. Thank you.